As kids, many of us would pretend to be superheroes. Some of us would even find clothing and various other items to don as our superhero attire. It was fun and it allowed us to escape into our own world of fantasy. However, in reality, there are real enemies we have to face without the luxury of a superpower. Yahuah's children, on the other hand, were given a special attire to help them fight against the evils of this world. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, let's get into it. So to start off, I just want to read Ephesians 6, verses 10 to 18, which says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in Yahuah and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahuah, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of Yahuah, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the basarah of shalom. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Ruach, which is the word of Yahuah, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Ruach, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all Kadashayam, or saints." So I just want to first start off by mentioning, back when I was in Christianity, it was always preached to us that this armor was likened unto that of Roman soldiers. And I used to go along with it because at the time it did make sense to me. But we have to remember that the creator that we're worshiping is not a physical being, but a spirit. So with that being said, every single thing that is of spirit is far superior than the physical. As a matter of fact, Yahusha told the woman at the well that we're supposed to worship Yahusha in spirit, or Ruach, and in truth, right? So once Yahuah awakened me, as a matter of fact, I want to say it was before I was awakened. I had started to, think about this, but it was once I was awakened that he finally showed me exactly what this armor is. And again, we have to remember that Shaul, or Paul, is the one that actually wrote the book of Ephesians, or the epistle of Ephesians. So with that being said, him being a former Pharisee would have more insight into just what this armor was. He called it armor, but if you knew what it really was, you wouldn't first think of it as an armor. But if you think about who it is that's using these garments, it makes more sense that it is a type of armor. So that's what we're going to get into. Just to start off, I'm going to read Exodus, or Shemath, 28, 1-5. Now, here's the thing. The whole chapter talks about the garments of the Levitical priesthood. However, 1-5 is what we're going to start with. And it reads, "And take unto you Aaron, your brother," so this is Yahuah talking to Masha, "Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Yasharal, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office, even Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, Alazar, and Ithamar." Hope I pronounced all those right. "Aaron's sons, and you shall make Kadash garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty. And you shall speak unto all that are wise-hearted, whom I have filled with the Ruach Chokmah, which is the Ruach of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, and an ephod, and a robe, and a broidered coat, a turban, and a belt. And they shall make Kadash garments for Aaron your brother and his sons, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. and they shall take gold and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. Now, before I continue, I think it's important to hear what Yahuah said to Masha going back into chapter 19 of Exodus. I'm going to read 1-6. In the 3rd month, when the children of Yasharal were gone forth out of the land of Mitzrayim, that's Egypt, the same day came they unto the wilderness of Sinai, for they were departed from the Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Yasharal camped before the mount. And Masha went up unto Aluah, and Yahuah called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Yasharal, You have seen what I did unto the Mitzrayim, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and guard my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure, I'm getting tongue-tied, unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a Kadash or holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak unto the children of Yasharal. All right. So Aaron and his sons represent how we are all supposed to be with these Kadash or holy garments adorned. And if you go back to Exodus 28, you'll see that there are some similar garments here that are also listed in Ephesians. For instance, the breastplate, the belt, and the turban are 3 things that you also see listed in Ephesians 8. Now, here's what Yahuah had showed me. Some of the aspects of the armor of Yahuah in Ephesians chapter 6. I meant chapter 6. I think I said chapter 8 just a minute ago, but Ephesians chapter 6 are spiritual, like prayer, faith. Those are spiritual. And even the word of Yahuah, which is the sword of the spirit, the sword of the Ruach, those are spiritual things. Those are, I mean, all of it is spiritual, but I'm just saying, like, if we're comparing these physical garments to the garments that Paul is talking about in Ephesians chapter 6, you can see some of the physical aspects here in the Levitical priesthood garments, but there are aspects of the armor in Ephesians 6 that are strictly just spiritual. It's not something you could observe per se. But again, all of the garments are spiritual. I just want to keep making that known. Now, I'm not going to read this, but I will say that you can also find these garments and how, Exodus 28 talks in depth about the Levitical garments. So that's the reason why you should probably read the entire chapter, because Masha is given specific instructions on how they should be made, how they should be adorned, all that stuff. And then Leviticus chapter 8, verses 1-16 also talks about these same garments. So I would just say, if Yahuah leads you to do just a Bible study on those 2 different books and chapters, Exodus 28, the full chapter, Leviticus 8, I would say also the full chapter. 1-16 is the one that talks about the garments, but the full chapter, I always do the full chapter, just to get a better understanding of what these garments are, because you can't put on garments that you aren't aware of. If you're thinking that there's something that they're not, you're not really going to be able to put them on. So it's very important to know what the garments are. So now that leads me to bring up what the garments actually are individually. So the first thing we have that's talked about is the belt of truth. First and foremost, we know that Yahusha is the truth. John or Yehukanan 14:6 says, Yahusha said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father, but by me. So the belt of truth. This is security. We are secure in Yahuah through Yahusha HaMashiach. The belt of truth is the truth that we are in with Yahusha. With Yahuah via Yahusha. And the belt secures the entire garments around you. So you got to have truth. Makes sense as the reason why it was the first item that was listed. So just a few scriptures that talk about security. Ephesians 1:13 says, in whom you also trusted, after that you heard the word of truth, the basarah of your salvation, in whom also after that you believed, you were sealed with that Ruach HaKodesh of promise. There's also a very popular Psalm 91. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Psalm 91 is another one that talks about the security that we have in Yahuah, but we can only have that security through Yahushua HaMashiach, because Yahushua brings us into peace with Yahuah. He brings us into a peaceful covenant with Yahuah, according to Romans 5:1 and various other parts of the Torah. And so now I want to talk about the breastplate of righteousness. So first and foremost, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you go to Exodus 28, I want to say it's either 28 or it's Leviticus 8. But one of those, it actually calls the breastplate that the priests wear the breastplate of judgment. So I have kind of adapted to calling it the breastplate of righteous judgment, because righteousness comes from you judging righteously. And when you think about a breastplate is put in place to guard your heart, right? So a breastplate is just another way of, it's like a bulletproof vest, basically, but it's put in place to guard your heart, which is a very vital organ. I mean, out of the heart flow the issues of life, or something to that effect. I know I'm quoting that wrong, but those that know what I'm talking about. But the heart is very important. I mean, Yahuah tells us all the time that he's constantly looking at our hearts, and there's a reason for that. If you haven't already, go back and listen to Ark of the Covenant and the Testimony. I don't know which number episode it is, but that's the title of the episode. And Yahuah has me go into detail about how our hearts are the Ark of the Covenant that the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach that he gives to us is placed in. So I'm not going to say anymore. Just, if you're led to, go back and listen to that for a more in-depth explanation. But here are just two passages that kind of speak to guarding your heart. There's a whole bunch. I just chose two, one from what we call the Old Testament and one from what we call the New Testament. So this is Proverbs 4:23. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. You know, here's the funny thing. When I wrote down Proverbs 4:23 in my notes, I had read it, because I make sure I read these before I put them in here, just to make sure it's the one that I was thinking of that popped into my head. I completely forgot that that's what that said. So when I was trying to quote it just a minute ago, that was Yahuwah's way of saying, just read what you already got written down. You ain't have to worry about trying to remember it. That's so funny. Okay, moving on. So Luke 6:45 says, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. So the heart is very important. Out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. So if the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach is what dwells in your heart, or your Ark of the Covenant, then that is the abundance of what you will speak, the word. But if it's fleshly things, if the testimony of Yahushua is not in there, you're going to speak carnally. It doesn't even matter what level of carnality it is. It's going to be carnal, because there's no testimony of Yahuwah. The word of Yahuwah is not in your heart. So it's very important we have this breastplate of righteous judgment, because we can't even judge righteously without Ruach HaKodesh. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just a righteous judgment towards other people. It's also towards ourselves, because in order to confess to Yahuwah that you are a sinner and you've done something and then repent from it, you have to righteously judge yourself. You got to be sober-minded about who you really are. You can't be a finger pointer or a blame shifter. You got to hold yourself accountable when it's time to hold yourself accountable. Now, there is an unrighteous way of holding yourself accountable, and that's called self-condemnation. When you are constantly apologizing for stuff you didn't do, or not receiving the forgiveness that Yahuwah gave you when you confessed and repented of that thing, you are self-condemning yourself. Well, that's repetitive. You're condemning yourself. So with that being said, that's an unrighteous way of holding yourself accountable, because you're dwelling on the sin instead of focusing on the one who can cure you of the sin or heal you of the sin. Take it away. Hallelujah. Now this next one is one that Yahuwah recently gave me a revelation about, which I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. So the next part of your armor is having your feet prepared with the Basura of Shalom, or the gospel of peace. Or I say the Basura of peace, right? So that means that we are peacemakers. So about a week or two ago, Yahuah brought me to Matthew 5:9, which says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of Yahuah." And what he did was he spoke to me about how we have consistently been misreading that. A lot of times, when most of us, and I'm not going to say all of us, I'm pretty sure there's somebody out there that got it way before me. I'm not that special. But for most of us, when we read that and you think of peacemakers, you think of somebody that is always docile, somebody that, they avoid conflict with people, somebody that is you just think of this very meek person, which is nothing wrong with that. However, it's not necessarily what Yahuah meant, because the peace that he's talking about is a different type of peace. So listen at this. I'm going to read Leviticus 7:15-18, then Romans 5:1, and then I'm going to get into it. So Leviticus 7:15-18 says, "And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day that it is offered. He should not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering be a vow or a voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day that he offers the sacrifice, and on the morrow also the remainder of it shall be eaten. But the remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day shall be burnt with fire. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings be eaten at all on the third day, it should not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offers it. It should be an abomination, and the soul that eats of it shall bear his iniquity." Now, mind you, these are talking about peace offerings, and there's two types of peace offerings. There's the Thanksgiving offering, which was the first one that was mentioned in verse 15. But now we're talking about vow offerings or voluntary offerings. And I want to say it's in Leviticus. I know I said I was going to go to Romans 5, but I just want to go to Leviticus 21 real quick, because there's a reason why it is considered an abomination to eat your vow offering on the third day. And it's according to what it says in Leviticus chapter 21. Is it 21? Hold on, let me see. And I just want to correct myself. It's Deuteronomy 23. Debarayam 23, starting at verse 21, which says, "When you shall vow a vow unto Yahuah your Eluah, you shall not slack to pay it. For Yahuah your Eluah will surely require it of you, and it would be sin in you. But if you shall forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in you. That which is gone out of your lips, you shall guard and perform it, even a free will offering, according as you have vowed unto Yahuah your Eluah, which you have promised with your mouth." So there's a lot in here. So obviously he's talking about vowing a vow unto Yahuah, which we're talking about the vow, the peace offering that is a vow. So that's what makes the difference. So basically it's saying that if you vow something, if you make a vow offering unto Yahuah, you got to do what you said. Otherwise it becomes a sin if you tell Yahuah you're going to do something and you don't do it. It would be better for you not to vow to do something and then not do it, than for you to vow to do it and not do it. You feel me? As a matter of fact, I want to say that Yahusha talks about this, where he talks about the two sons, and the father told the first son to do something, and he told the father that he was going to do something, and then he didn't do it. But the second son, the father told him to do something, and he didn't say he was going to do it, but he wound up doing it anyway. It was better for the second son than it was for the first son, because the first son vowed a vow, but he didn't perform it. So it was sin unto him. And again, going back to verse 15 of Leviticus chapter 7, it mentions it being a voluntary offering. That's the same thing as a free will offering. It's something that you offer voluntarily out of your free will. Then when you go down to the last part of verse 23, it literally says you have promised this with your mouth unto Yahuah. So you're giving Yahuah lip service if you vow through this voluntary peace offering, but then you don't perform it. It's lip service. You vowing to dedicate your life to his service, but then you don't do anything he says. That's lip service. It's sin because you're being disobedient at this point. Perfectly, that makes sense. And then when you connect it to Romans 5:1, which reads, therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with Yahuwah through our Adonai Yahushua HaMashiach. So we can see, according to Shaul or Paul, which again, let me keep reminding you that he is a former Pharisee. He is a former teacher of the law that has now been awakened unto the truth that who is Yahushua HaMashiach. All right. So it's not that he needs to be taught that there is a law. He needs to be taught what the law truly is on a spiritual or ruachal level. So he's letting us know that Yahusha is the peace offering. We cannot have peace with Yahuwah unless we accept the sacrifice that Yahusha gave us by his death, burial, and resurrection. And then through him, we have peace with Yahuwah. That's the covenant that we have with Yahuwah. It's a peaceful covenant. So what does that have to do with Matthew 5:9 and us being peacemakers? Well, a peacemaker is someone who is a faithful witness of Yahushua HaMashiach. So you've been awakened and given the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach to place into your heart or your Ark of the Covenant. And you're sent out to give that testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach to other people, whomever Yahuwah sends you to, so they may be at peace with Yahuwah through Yahushua HaMashiach as well. So you go out, you give the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach to whomever. Not everybody's going to receive that testimony, but the ones that do receive that testimony, they now receive it into their heart, and they too become witnesses, faithful witnesses of Yahushua HaMashiach, which puts them in peace with Yahuwah. And Yahusha even kind of hints around about this in Yehukanan, John 14:26. He tells his Lamudayam, but the Comforter, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. Actually, it's verse 27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So he's letting you know the peace that I'm giving you is not the same as the peace that the world is offering, right? Because first and foremost, we know that the world is not offering anything peaceful. And they might call it peace, but it's definitely full of anxiety and turmoil. However, he's still letting you know that what you think is peace is still not peace. The peace that I'm offering you is peace with Yahuwah through me. This is what Yahusha is telling them. And he actually confirmed that back up in verse 21. He that has my commandments and guards them, he it is that loves me, and he that loves me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him, and will manifest myself to him. So Yahuwah will love you if you love his son and you keep and guard his commandments, right? So that means that you have peace. That is your peace offering to Yahuwah. That is how we become peacemakers. We give the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach as a faithful witness of Yahushua HaMashiach to other people. And when they come into covenant with Yahuwah through Yahushua HaMashiach, they now have peace. We help make peace with them and Yahuwah by introducing them to Yahusha. That is the peacemaker. So that is why our feet are supposed to be prepared with the Besorah, the good news of Shalom, peace. We're coming to let people know that you can have peace with Yahuwah through his son Yahusha, and we tell them how. Peacemaker, part of your garment. And remember, this is not Roman soldier garments. This is priestly garments. Think about how a priest is supposed to operate. A priest is supposed to operate in this manner, in a peaceful manner, bring teaching and bring rebuke and bring whatever. They're supposed to minister to you, however you need to be ministered to, in order for you to come into peace with Yahuwah. So it makes sense that this is part of this garment. Next one up is our shield of faith. So Yehukanan, John 6:28-29 says, Then said they unto him, What shall we do that we might work the works of Yahuwah? Yahusha answered and said unto them, This is the work of Yahuwah, that you believe on him whom he has sent. So you cannot do anything in Yahuwah's kingdom if you don't believe in Yahusha. That's the testimony. So he's letting you know if you don't have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, well, he's letting you know if you don't have the testimony of him, who's the truth. But if you do not hold the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach in your Ark of the Covenant, which is your heart, you can't do the works of Yahuwah. Think about Matthew 7:23, when Yahushua said that there's going to be some people that's like, I did all this in your name. And he's like, away from me, I never knew you. They didn't hold the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach in their heart. So they did not believe in the one whom Yahuwah sent, which means they cannot work the works of Yahuwah. Hopefully it all makes sense. It all makes sense to me, but hopefully it all makes sense to you who's listening. I mean, not that you guys can't understand, but prayerfully, I'm allowing Ruach HaKodesh to lead me into what to say so that it's understood, because sometimes I have a tendency on my own to make things a little more complicated than it needs to be. But it sounds right in my head. If y'all only heard some of the things that go on in my head sometimes, you'd be like, how do you function? But that's just how my brain operates, y'all. Okay, so Yehukanan, John 20:29 says, Yahushua said unto him, Tayom, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. So that's us. We have not seen Yahushua, not with our physical eyes. I'm pretty sure somewhere there's somebody that's had a dream or been taken up into the Ruach, and maybe Yahuwah has allowed them to see in the spirit. But physically, none of us have laid our eyes on Yahushua. So with that being said, there's a lot of us right now that still believe in and honor Yahushua. So Yahushua's saying we're blessed because we believe and we haven't even seen him. Because realistically, for all we know, it could be farce. But we don't believe that. We believe him to be the truth. We believe this to be true. So with that being said, he's saying that we are blessed because of that. So the shield of faith, because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, right? So that's why I threw that in there. And then Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, I'm just going to paraphrase it, but trust in Yahuwah with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he shall direct your paths. I had to remember. But praise Yah for his Ruach HaKodesh, because I got it. So the shield of faith is what quenches the fiery darts of the enemy or of the wicked. So fiery darts are stuff like doubt and weariness, right? So I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to give you guys a little insight into myself. There are times, for instance, when Yahuwah will speak something to me, and immediately there's a voice in my head that's like, you didn't really hear that. Like, you just made that up. And even so, when Yahuwah is like, yeah, go tell this to such and such and such and such, I'm like, is that me? And so a part of me doesn't want to do it. And there's sometimes that I have put off saying what Yahuwah told me to say. And then later on, it comes to find out that it was something I should have said, but because I didn't say it, then I'll be sitting there like, dang, I'm not perfect. I do have those moments. So with that being said, there was that voice that was talking me down out of it. That was doubt, right? That was a fiery dart of the enemy. And I didn't do a good job with my shield of faith with quenching those fiery darts. But that's what the faith is for. Because if you believe in Yahushua HaMashiach, you will apply the word of Yahuwah to your life. And when the enemy is coming towards you, you'll get that sword out, which I think is actually the next piece of it's helmet of salvation, but it is one of the pieces of the armor. But as far as the shield of faith is concerned, think about when Yahushua was led into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. He was led by the Ruach HaKodesh into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And you remember whenever the devil would say something, Yahushua would say, it is written, and then he would say what was written. And it was usually something that was in the law somewhere, right? That is how you do it. That is how you, the enemy starts putting that doubt in your mind. You could either say it is written, or you could just say what it is that Yahuwah's word says. But you have to constantly remind yourself of what Yahuwah has already said. That's why we're supposed to study to show ourselves approved. And studying to show ourselves approved is not just us reading this history book and memorizing the scripture and where they are and all this other stuff. It's also studying Yahushua, the being, the person, Yahushua. I mean, that's the reason why the book of John is a very good book to start with if you're new to reading this history book, because that book literally outlines the person of Yahusha. You really get to see in full depth, well, in more depth, the relationship that he has with Yahuah, and how obedient he is to Yahuah, and how he never strayed from Yahuah's law. That part, because we're so focused on the miracles and all the other supernatural things, but we forget that we're supposed to be following him, which means in order for us to get to those miracles and all that other stuff, we actually have to do what he did. And he literally said that he didn't speak anything that he wasn't taught of the Father, and he didn't do anything he didn't see his Father do. So he even said that the judgment that he gives is the judgment of the Father. So he's literally just relaying everything that the Father is doing and saying. Feel me? Which is all we're supposed to do. It should never be our own opinion or our thoughts or our speculation, unless you preface what you say with the fact that this is my thought, my opinion, or my speculation. That way a person does not get it confused with what Yahuah is saying versus what you're saying. Which brings me to the helmet of salvation. Who is Yahusha? Yahusha is our head. Because remember, this is a body. So Ephesians 5:25, is that 25 or 23? 23. For the man is the head of woman, even as Mashiach is the head of the called out assembly, and he is the savior of the body. That's the reason why our helmet of salvation is Yahusha. The truth of the matter is, if you don't have Yahusha, you're not going to have the rest of your armor. You're not going to have the belt of truth. You're not going to have your feet prepared with a basora of salvation or shalom. You're not going to have a breastplate of righteous judgment, because, it all starts with Yahusha. It all starts at the head. And the thing is, a helmet protects the mind, the brain, right? Get shot in the head, pierces your brain, more than likely you're going to die. Very rarely does somebody live from that. But even the ones that live from that, most of the time they go on to live a very miserable life as an invalid. That's not what we want. We don't want to be spiritual invalids. So because Yahusha is the head, it's safe to say that he is the door to salvation, or he's the way to salvation. So let's look at Yehukadan, John 10:1-16. Aman, aman, I say unto you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he put forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable spoke Yahusha unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spoke unto them. Then said Yahusha unto them again, Aman, aman, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enters in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. Let's read verse 9 again. I am the door. By me, if any man enters in, he shall be saved, helmet of salvation, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thieves come not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they may have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. That's eternity. Having abundant life is eternity. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches them and scatters the sheep. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and cares not for the sheep. Verse 13 again. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and cares not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knows me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there should be one fold and one shepherd. Now, verse 16 is literally talking about the Gentiles coming in. So for anybody that's still confused or wants to argue about the fact that Gentiles are part of Yasharal, Yahusha himself said that there's sheep from another flock. They're not of this fold, but I got to bring them in. And once I bring them in, there'll be one fold and one shepherd, or one flock and one shepherd. Yahushua said this. Nobody's making this up. And I know that there's some people that talk about, oh, well, the New Testament isn't a true testament because it was written by Greeks and all this. Like, okay, so let's go back to Ruth. Ruth was a whole Gentile. She came into the bloodline of Yahushua HaMashiach. Well, she contributed to the bloodline of Yahushua HaMashiach because she married Boaz, or Baaz, who is of the bloodline of Yahushua HaMashiach. And their son was Abad, or Obed, who was the father of Yeshai, who was the father of Dawood, the king. Don't believe me? Go back and read Matthew 1. Literally tells you this. Ruth was a Moabitess. The Moabites are the cousins of the Israelites. Lot is the progenitor of the Moabites because that is one of the, I think his oldest daughter slept with him, had a kid, and it was Moab. And then the younger daughter slept with him, had a kid, and it was Ammon, right? So Ammon and Moab are cousins of the Israelites, but they are not Israelites, which makes them Gentiles. Okay? Just so we're clear, because it's people want to argue this all the time. Matter of fact, it was a mixed multitude that came out of Egypt with the Israelites and Masha and Aaron and Maryam. They were not all Israelites that came out. There were some people that were not. It says it in the book of Exodus. It was a mixed multitude. Yahuah is showing us these things to let us know that there are some people who were born Gentiles that he has known from the foundation of the earth, just like the Israelites, the natural branches, shall I say. And these Gentiles will be grafted in and they will become Yasharal, because Yahuah tells us, Leviticus chapter 19. Give me just a second while I go there. Praise Yah, because I wasn't planning on saying any of this, but it must be necessary because he's telling me to, and I know you guys can hear me flipping these pages, so I apologize. Leviticus 19, starting in verse 33. And if a stranger sojourn with you in your land, you shall not vex him, but the stranger that dwells with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. I am Yahuah Eluah. So for all those that wants to say, oh, the neighbor, because earlier in chapter 19, start in verse 18, it says, you shall not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahuah. So there's a lot of people that are like, well, your neighbor is other Israelites. Okay, well, just in case it was confusing, in verse 33, Yahuah makes it known that the stranger is like one of you as well. They are as one of you. This is Yahuah's word. So let's put down these false doctrines. The Gentiles, when they come into covenant with Yahuah through Yahushua HaMashiach, they are as the Israelites. Point blank, period. Not my word, but that's Yahuah's word. And that's on Yah. All right. So going back to Yehukadan 10, 1-16, where Yahushua talks about he is the door of the sheepfold, so on and so forth. That kind of resonates and goes back to Leviticus chapter 8, 31-35. Masha was told to tell Aaron and his sons that they are to dwell in the door of the tabernacle of the assembly for 7 days, day and night, and not to remove themselves out of the door, because in the day that they do, they shall die. Yahushua is the door of the tabernacle of the assembly. The tabernacle of the assembly is the sheepfold. That is the sheep pen where the sheep dwell. And the door is Yahushua. Again, that's Leviticus 8, 31-35, if you want to go back and read it on your own. So this is going back to John 14:6. Yahushua is the way, the truth, and the life. And no man comes to the Father but by him. You cannot come to Yahuah except by Yahushua. And he even says in the beginning that the people that don't come through the door, remember, he's the door. People that don't come through the door and enter the sheepfold some other way are thieves and robbers. These would be those people that say his name doesn't matter. I'm going to call him whatever I feel like calling him. He knows who I'm talking to. That's not what Yahuah said. That's some stuff that some demon done whispered in somebody's ear. It's a doctrine of devils. It's a tradition of men, and people are running with it. Yahuah named his son personally. He told us there is no other name above his son's name by which anyone should be saved but Yahushua HaMashiach. So with that being said, you're coming in through some other way that's not Yahushua, you're a thief and a robber. Not my word. As a matter of fact, on a brief little side note, I want to go to Matthew 1, starting at verse 18, and I'm going to go all the way down to 25, just so we can see this in real time, because before verse 18, you see the lineage of Yahushua HaMashiach. You see these are all Hebrew people, all Israelite people, except for like Ruth and I think that's it, and Tamar. They're not Israelites, but the bloodline goes through the father. So the children are still Israelites according to Yahuah, right? So this proceeds, verse 1 to 17, that proceeds verse 18 is talking about the lineage of Yahushua HaMashiach. Verse 18 starts with, now the birth of Yahushua HaMashiach was on this wise. When as his mother Maryam was espoused to Yusuf before they came together, she was found with child of the Ruach HaKodesh. Then Yusuf, her man, being a just man, not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of Yahuah appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Yusuf, son of Dawood. Now, I'm going to stop right there, because if you go over here to verse 6, and Yeshe begot Dawood the king, and Dawood begot Shalomah, of her that had been the woman of Yahuah. So we're already seeing right here that Yusuf is an Israelite. Matter of fact, if you go down to verse 16, we'll go up to verse 16. And Jacob begot Yusuf, the father of Maryam, of whom was born Yahushua, who is called Mashiach. So verse 16 and then verse 20 let you know that both of Yahusha's parents, Yusuf, Maryam, are Israelites. I should actually say both of his guardians, because we know his father is Yahuah. Fear not to take unto you Maryam your woman, for that which is conceived in her is of the Ruach HaKodesh. And she shall bring forth a son, and you shall call his name JC? Yeshua? Yahusha. These are Israelites. They would have called him by an Israelite name, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done, as do all the rest of the ones in their lineage. Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of Yahuah by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call the name of the same Emmanuel, which being interpreted is, Our Eluah is with me. Then Yusuf, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of Yah had bidden him, and took unto him his woman, and knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Yahusha. So Yahuah named this boy, this man, his son. Yahuah named his son. And so we keep telling people that it don't matter what you call him, it does. Because there are names out there that are actually attributed to fallen angels. And you trying to get into Yahuah's kingdom by calling on a fallen angel. And that's not the door. That's another way. And that makes you a thief and a robber. I know I went off on a tangent, but it was for a reason. Obviously, because Yahuah had me to do it. So I just want to make sure that we're on one accord with that. If we're not, that's something you need to go to Yahuah about. But this is Yahuah's word. And I just took you to places to show you that I ain't making this up. All right. Hallelujah. Now Acts 2:38 says, Then Kappa said, or that's Peter, said unto them, Repent and be immersed, every one of you, in the name of Yahuah for the remission of sins, and you shall receive the gift of Ruach HaKodesh. 1 Timothy 2:5 says, For there is one Eluah and one mediator between Yahuah and men, the man Mashiach Yahusha. So Yahushua HaMashiach is the mediator between man and Yahuah, or Yahuah and man. All right? The door. The peace offering. Now, I'm not going to read Isaiah or Yashayahu 53. It's only 12 verses, but I'm not going to read it because I don't want this to be extra long. But I would recommend go and read it, because verse 53 of Yashayahu, Isaiah, is talking about Yahushua HaMashiach. And again, this is for those that don't want to believe that the New Testament is of Yahuwah. Here's something in the Old Testament for you to go read so you can see that it's still saying the same thing. Yahuwah's word has never changed. And now that gets me into the sword of the Ruach, which I briefly mentioned before. So something that I heard Ruach HaKodesh say to me not too long ago was, you sound like your teacher. So whoever's teaching you is who you're going to sound like. And I know this to be true because I know someone that is affiliated with some people that I used to be affiliated with in Christianity. And when I listen to this person speak, I instantly can hear those two people that she's affiliated with that I used to be, well, I still know them, but I'm not affiliated with them anymore. When she speaks, I can hear these two people speaking through her, because what she says sounds like what they teach. And so if Yahuwah is our teacher, we will sound like Yahuwah. Pretty much what you eat spiritually will come out of you type of thing, like what Yahushua mentioned in Matthew 15 10 to 11, when he said, it's not that which goes into a man that defiles him, but that which comes out of the man that defiles him. Something to that effect. I know I'm butchering it. Matthew 15 10 to 11, so you can get the full what he says. But he's letting you know that it's not what you're putting in that defiles you. It's what is coming out of you, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, or the lips speak, right? So it's what's in your heart that's coming out of your mouth. But then going back to the Ark of the Covenant and the testimony, if it's not Yahushua that's there, it's something else. And if it's anything other than Yahushua, it's not righteous. So if that's what's in your heart, that's what's going to come out. So you're going to sound like your teacher. And it's all about whose voice are you listening to. So first, I want to go to John, Yehukanan 6:45. It is written, remember I talked about the sword. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of Yahuwah. Every man, therefore, that has heard and has learned of the Father comes unto me. So you can't come to Yahushua unless you have learned and heard of the Father. As a matter of fact, if you go up to verse 44, he actually says this. So he's just reiterating this in here. Verse 44 says, no man can come to me except the Father which has sent me draws him, and I will raise him up at the last day. So Yahushua is saying, you can't even come to me unless Yahuwah wakes you up and draws you unto me. Like, it's not us that's doing it. You feel me? None of us woke ourselves up. Yahuwah did. And Yahushua is actually referencing Isaiah or Yashayahu 54 and 13. I am literally looking at this on this page and I'm still saying the wrong thing. Isaiah 54 and 13 is where you can find where it is written when he says this. And I already accidentally read John 14 and 26. So I'll just reference you back to that. You don't have to actually read it if you don't want to. But, Yahushua is just saying that, matter of fact, I will read it. But the Comforter, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. So Yahuwah is letting us know how Yahuwah is going to teach us, and that's through his Ruach HaKodesh. And that's why Yahushua told his Lamudayam, like, when they bring you into the synagogues and all this stuff to question you and all this other stuff, don't worry about what to say, because the Ruach HaKodesh will give you the words to say. Because in that moment, Ruach HaKodesh will start bringing the word out of your heart and out of your mouth, right? I've actually been in those situations recently. It's two separate incidences where people were questioning the truth. Neither one of them were very defiant about their questioning, but they didn't believe. So, and both of them were Christians. So through conversation, when I was a Christian, when I would come across these types of interactions, I would literally have to fumble through the Bible and try to find something to say to minister to that person. But with these two recent conversations, it was just another way that Yahuah solidified that Yahusha is the truth, because when they would say their rebuttal or their thoughts or their opinions, or even spew the indoctrination that was given to them via their belief system, their current belief system, immediately Ruach HaKodesh would say what the word is. And sometimes I could tell you where it was in the Bible, and sometimes I couldn't, but I knew it was Yahusha coming out. I knew that was Yahusha coming out. That was the sword of the Ruach, which is the word of Yahusha. The word of Yahuah. I knew that's what was coming out. And it wasn't because I'm just so perfect and I remember scripture and I can quote it perfectly and all this other stuff. It's because Ruach HaKodesh is my teacher and dwells in me. As a matter of fact, earlier in in chapter 14, Yahusha says that the Ruach HaKodesh will be in you. So then later when you hear Ruach HaKodesh is your teacher, he's teaching from within you. Okay. But I know this to be true from personal experience. So Tehillim, or Psalm 32:8 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way which you shall go. I will guide you with my eye. Yashayahu, Isaiah 48:17 says, Thus says Yahuah, your Redeemer, the Kadash one of Yasharal. I am Yahuah, your Eluah, which teaches you to profit, which leads you by the way that you should go. Matthew 11:28-30 says, Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, this is Yahusha speaking, but we know that Yahusha is the word of Yahuah. And we know that he only spoke the things that he heard his father speak, or he was taught of his father. So with that being said, and that's scripture. I can't remember exactly where right now. I know it's in the book of John. I just don't remember which chapter. But matter of fact, I think it's 16. Hold on one second. Before I get there, I do want to point out that Yehukanan, John 16:13 says, Howbeit, when he, the Ruach Amatz, as the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. For he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, and he will show you things to come. Now, in the midst of me looking for what I was looking for, I found that. But while I found that, or after I found that, Ruach HaKodesh reminded me that it was John Yehukanan chapter 8, where I was looking for what I was looking for. So it's verse 26. I have many things to say and to judge of you, but he that sent me, that's the Father, is true, and I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him. So Yahusha's letting you know that he is speaking what he heard the Father say. I'm going to continue to verse 28. They understood not that he spoke to them of the Father. Then said Yahusha unto them, When you have lifted up the son of Adam, they shall know you. Then shall you know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father has taught me, I speak these things. So Yahuah is Yahusha's teacher. Yahusha is our teacher via Ruach HaKodesh. We learn of Yahuah because Yahusha's only doing and saying what he learned of his Father, and Ruach HaKodesh is reminding us of those things. So when we obey Yahusha's commandments, we're actually by default obeying Yahuah's commandments, because he only did and said and judges according to the Father, which is why we have to honor the Son, because if we don't honor the Son, we don't honor the Father either. That is John 5:23. That all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honors not the Son honors not the Father which has sent him. Okay? Now, when you keep all this in mind, go back and read Debarayam or Deuteronomy 8:3, which says, And he humbled you and suffered you to hunger, and fed you with manna which you knew not, neither did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread only, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahuah man lives. You also see Yahusha say that in Matthew 4:4. But he's letting you know that you got to eat the word, because the word is your teacher. That is how your spirit lives. That is how you live spiritually. and then you will sound like your teacher. The sword of the Ruach is the word of Yahuah. And you can see this actually in Yehukanan 6 and 57. As the living Father has sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eats me, even he shall live by me. So again, that just reiterates what was just said. If you eat the word, you will live by the word. So you will have the sword of the Ruach, which is the word of Yahuah. And finally, Galatians 5:17 reads, for the flesh lusts against the Ruach, and the Ruach against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do things that you would. But if you be led by the Ruach, you are not under the law. All right? Because you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing ruachally anyway. You're already doing what Yahuah wants you to do. So the penalty of the law is what you're not under anymore. And that leads me to the last part of the armor, which is the part that I will admit that I used to miss all the time, because I was always taught to stop at verse 17 with the sword. But there's one more piece of this armor that's very crucial, as a matter of fact. That's verse 18, prayer. Not just any prayer, but praying with all supplication at all times. I.e., praying without ceasing. So let's take a look at 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of Yahuah in Mashiach Yahusha concerning you. And everything give thanks, which is the other part of prayer, thanksgiving. Philippians 4:6, which reads, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto Yahuah. Then you have private prayer. So Matthew 6:6 says, but you, when you pray, enter into your closet, and when you have shut your door, pray to the Father which is in secret, and your Father which sees in secret shall reward you openly. And lastly, you have to believe in the prayer that you actually prayed. And all things, this is Matthew 21:22, and all things whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing you shall receive. All right. And let's understand that when it says all things, it's not talking about lustful things, all spiritual things. And I know this because if you ask for someone else's husband, Yahuah is not going to give you that just because you asked it in prayer and you believed he was going to do that. It's foolish to think that when he says all things, it actually means anything your heart desires. That's not the case. It's all things righteous. Okay. So to sum up this whole thing, the final piece of the armor, prayer or communication with Yahuah via his Ruach HaKodesh. The way Yahuah gave it to me is, if you think about war, because we're talking about armor, right? If you are part of the infantry, you go out and you're fighting. Before you go out, you need to communicate with your commanding officer, because your commanding officer knows where your enemy is. They have intel on the weapons that your enemy has. They have intel on the different booby traps, the different locations where they can have snipers. Like, your commanding officer has crucial information that you're going to need on that battlefield. So you don't just run out into the battle with no information and then boom, you step on a claymore. That's not what we're doing, right? You need to go to your commanding officer and you need to receive instructions on how and where and when to go out into the battle. That's why prayer is necessary. Communication, communing with Yahuah. When I think about the morning and evening prayer, this is what Yahuah said to me. Morning and evening prayer is, as soon as you wake up, you have a conversation with Yahuah. Before you go to bed, you have a conversation with Yahuah, especially before you go to bed. Because when you're asleep, your subconscious, is a lot of stuff that be going on that you're not aware of because you're asleep. But when you talk to Yahuah, especially if you ask him to guard you, remember, he's the fire by night, the cloud by day, right? You're asking him to guard you in your sleep, in your subconscious. I've even gone so far recently as to start asking him to have dominion over my dreams. So I'll be having these weird, crazy dreams that I have sometimes. you know. And then it's crucial for when you wake up, because you need to ask him, what do I need to do for the day? Because later on in Matthew 6, when it starts going into the disciples' prayer, because it's definitely not Yahushua's prayer. He said this is how you should pray. So when it starts going into that, we said, give us this day our daily bread. When he said that we're supposed to ask for our daily bread, it's not necessarily, I mean, I guess you could say, what's my daily bread for the day? But you're just asking Yahuah what he wants you to do for the day. What's his word for the day? What's his instructions for the day? That's your daily bread. That's the only thing you should be worried about eating, is what he told you for that day. Just like when he fed the Israelites in the wilderness with the manna. All the first 6 days of the week, they only worried about that day. Nothing else. You don't need to worry about what you're going to eat tomorrow. Just eat this today. It was only on the 6th day that they had enough manna to last them from the 6th day to the 7th day. That's it. That's all. Right? Because you don't need to worry about a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 15-year. You don't even know if you're going to be here tomorrow. So just worry about today, because tomorrow has enough worry of its own. Didn't Yahushua say that later on in Matthew 6? Don't worry about it. Worry about today. Worry about what Yahuwah told you to do today. That's why it's called the present. You know? Because tomorrow is the day of Yahuwah. You don't need to worry about that, because if you ain't doing what you're supposed to today, you don't want to see tomorrow. Okay, let me stop. All right, so before I end this, I just want to leave off with the Bar Yam, Deuteronomy 33:28-29, which says, Yasharal then shall dwell safe. Let me rewind this. Yasharal then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Yaakov shall be upon a land of grain and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down dew. Happy are you, O Yasharal, who is like unto you, O people saved by Yahuwah, the shield of your help, and who is the sword of your excellency. And your enemies shall be found liars unto you, and you shall tread upon their high places. So Yahuwah is our sword and shield. The shield of faith, the sword of the Ruach. We just read that. Hallelujah. Yahuah. So the next time you think about when you read Ephesians chapter 6 and you're told to put on your armor, think about what that armor is. You're putting on priestly garments. Okay? You are putting on the garments of a priest. So you are to have Yahushua first and foremost. If that helmet of salvation is not on, nothing else matters. Okay? Because that's protecting your mind. Right? And there are scriptures that talk about us being sober and vigilant to protect our minds, so on and so forth. I'm probably mashing some things together right now because I'm a little bit sleepy, but I will say this much. We are told to protect our minds, because the mind is the true battlefield that we are warring on anyway, because the enemy wants to cause us to doubt in our mind. And Yahushua has told us to have faith or believe in our mind. So we're really battling in our minds about what voice we're going to listen to, Yahushua or another. That's where the true war is, right? So you put on your helmet of salvation. You have the breastplate, the belt of truth, which is very important because, again, it holds the garments in place. So when you're fighting, they're not swinging around and getting all in the way, but that truth secures them. The belt of truth is your security. Then you have the breastplate of righteousness that guards your heart. So that's another vital organ that needs to be guarded, okay? And Yahuwah hasn't given me quite yet a revelation as to why the 12 tribes of Yasharal are represented by the jewels on the breastplate of righteousness. So I'll leave that for another time if he should give that to me. But I'm pretty sure that is a very ruachal significance to that. And off the rip, I'll just say this is my speculation. That is just letting you know that this righteousness is coming through the nation that he created to be a nation of priests, kings and priests. And then you have the shield of faith, which quenches the fiery darts of the enemy, like doubt and weariness and whatever else goes against the nature of Yahuwah. You also have your sword of the Ruach, which is the word of Yahuwah. You have your feet prepared with the Basora of Shalom or peace. And then you have prayer, communication with Yahuah via Ruach HaKodesh. All right? That's your armor. If you're not putting this on every day, at some point in time, you're going to have a difficult time. You're going to falter. Here's the good news. If that should happen, Yahuah says that a righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets back up. Do not dwell on the fact that you weren't perfect that day. Yahuah is not caught off guard by our imperfections and our humanity. He understands the creation that he created. That's why he gave us his Ruach by slaughtering his son and then resurrecting his son, so that his son can give up the Ruach and we can all receive the Ruach now. He understands the assignment. It does not catch him off guard. Confess, repent, and walk even harder than you did the day before, okay? It's good. You're good. All right. If you want to get in contact with me, you know what to do. Contact me at replenishme@gmail.com. RIPLENISH me@gmail.com. I almost forgot how to spell it. All right, you guys. Much ahava and shalom.